Audio Jungle.
Alright, so it's 30 minutes past 9. I welcome you to another exciting edition of From the Newspaper, streaming live at the premises of the Aces Hotel, Akpete, Ibadan. Good morning to you all who are listening to MFM Radio and TV. This MFM Radio and TV where we set the agenda and project the truth. Don't forget you can watch us live on Facebook at MFM 97.3, and as you're watching us, don't forget to like, comment and share. Moreover, don't forget this program is in form of 3 segments. The first segment is the weather forecast report of 3 major cities in Nigeria: the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, the commercial city of Lagos, and the vibrant city of Ibadan. Where the last segment on the show is the details to the headlines. My name is SHAQEEROH AKINYEMI. Alright, so moving on to the first segment of the show this morning, which is the weather forecast report. On the first city I'll bring it on is the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. At 10 a.m. in Abuja this morning is thunderstorms with 22 degrees Celsius. At 11 a.m. is thunderstorms with 23 degrees Celsius. And at 12 p.m. is cloudy with 23 degrees Celsius. At 1 p.m. is cloudy with 23 degrees Celsius. And at 2 p.m. is mostly cloudy with 24 degrees Celsius. At 3 p.m. is mostly cloudy with 25 degrees Celsius. And at 4 p.m. is intermittent cloud with 26 degrees Celsius. At 5 p.m. is intermittent cloud with 25 degrees Celsius. And at 6 p.m. is thunderstorms with 23 degrees Celsius. At 7 p.m. is thunderstorms with 23 degrees Celsius, and at 8 p.m. is thunderstorms with 22 degrees Celsius. At 9 p.m. is cloudy with 22 degrees Celsius, and at 10 p.m. is cloudy with 22 degrees Celsius. Up until 11 p.m. is cloudy with 21 degrees Celsius. Moving on to the commercial city of Lagos, at 10 a.m. in Lagos this morning is cloudy with 25 degrees Celsius. At 11 a.m. is cloudy with 26 degrees Celsius. And at 12 p.m. is cloudy with 26 degrees Celsius. At 1 p.m. is cloudy with 26 degrees Celsius. And at 2 p.m. is cloudy with 26 degrees Celsius. Up until 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. with 25 degrees Celsius. And at 10 p.m. is cloudy with 25 degrees Celsius. Up until 11 p.m. is cloudy with 25 degrees Celsius. So moving on to the last segment on the first this morning. At 10 a.m. in the vibrant city of Ibadan is thunderstorms with 24 degrees Celsius. At 11 a.m. is thunderstorms with 24 degrees Celsius. At 12 p.m. is cloudy with 24 degrees Celsius. At 1 p.m. is rainy with 25 degrees Celsius. At 2 p.m. is rainy with 24 degrees Celsius. At 3 p.m. is cloudy with 24 degrees Celsius. At 4 p.m. is raining with 23 degrees Celsius. At 5 p.m. is raining with 23 degrees Celsius. At 6 p.m. is cloudy with 23 degrees Celsius. At 7 p.m. is cloudy with 23 degrees Celsius. At 8 p.m. is cloudy with 22 degrees Celsius. At 9 p.m. is cloudy with 22 degrees Celsius. At 10 p.m. is thunderstorms with 22 degrees Celsius. At 11 p.m. is mostly cloudy with storms with 22 degrees Celsius.
Audio Jungle.
So moving on to the second segment on the show this morning, which is the headlines make round of Nigerian newspaper. And the first newspaper I'll bring in on this morning is the Punch newspaper. And the lead story on the Punch newspaper this morning says, 8.41 trillion naira oil theft drains economy, fuel investor doubt. In page 22 has the details to that story. To the Vanguard newspaper. The daily story on the Vanguard newspaper this morning says 14 banks fully meet new capital requirements, says CBN. In page 19 has the details to that story. And there are three riders to that story. The first rider says CBN reduced interest rates to 27%. Another rider says external reserves hit $43 billion. Another rider says NECA demand reform to ease cost of living crisis. And the last rider says CBN's easing of credit condition a welcome timely intervention, says CPPE. And page 19 has the details to that story. On the Vanguard newspaper says Pengasan kicks against federal government's planned sales of oil gas assets. And page 8 has the details to that story. Tinubu article in fierce battle for Buhari's northern bloc. And page 4 has the details to that story. PFN to government, fix economy, end corruption, empower citizens. And page 26 has the details to that story. Davido becomes Grammy voting member for 2026 awards. And page 9 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle. Still on Vanguard newspaper, another story says insecurity. Nursing moms adopted 3 soldiers jail for selling arms for terrorists. And page 5 has the details to that story. Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan storms Senate office, resumes duties. And page 8 has the details to that story. And there's one rider to that story that says defamation. Federal government alleged plots to reshuffle Natasha trial. And page 13 has the details to that story. Tinubu seek reform of global financial architecture. And page 5 has the details to that story. local list ethnicity, other has implemented to federalism. In page 12 has the details to that story. Story on the Vanguard newspaper says First Bank says to launch financial service for blind physical challenge customers. And page 20 has the details to that story. So moving on to the Guardian newspaper, the lead story on the Guardian newspaper this morning says Rider cracks in war order aimed warning on head court, Union's future. And page 6 has the details to that story. The Guardian newspaper says Tinubu's handling INEC transition will find Nigeria's democracy, says Yiga. And page 3 has the details to that story. Defamation case adjourned as Senate Natasha reads uncommon trials. In page 3 has the details to that story. Let's clarify borrowing plan, confirm new tax regime from January. And page 3 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
High blood pressure puts 1.4 billion people at risk, World Health Organization warns. And page 4 has the details to that story. Mopeng warns federal government against selling JV stake. And page 4 has the details to that story. Another story on the Guardian newspaper says concerns in Lagos APC at 4 elected female officials die in 2 months. And page 5 has the details to that story. Another story says relief for businesses as CBN is 4 years tightening cuts, interest rates to 27%. And page 6 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
sees 20.4 billion naira for National Library at birthday anniversary, and page 7 has the details to that story. Story on The Guardian says Benue High DPs votes to occupy FCT until normalcy returns, and page 29 has details to that story. To the Punch newspaper. The latest story on the Punch newspaper says 8.41 trillion naira oil theft drains the economy for investor doubts, and page 22 has the details to that story. And there are two riders to that story. The first rider says experts fault lack of arrest, prosecution in 4 years, I0 oil theft, and the last rider says regulator hails lowest losses in 60 years aimed reservation by analysts, and page 2 has the details to that stories. And above the line of Punch newspaper says 20 billion naira library fraud riser not for 2027, says Remi Tinubu, and page 29 has the details to that story. Natasha resumes as Zenith calls Akpabio dictator, and page 3 has the details to that story. Other story on the Punch newspaper says 411% revenue rise won't solve federal government borrowing, says Faiz, and page 2 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
CBN lower interest rates, OPS demands credit relief, and page 21 has the details to that story. Still on the Punch newspaper, another story says strike, SSANU, NASU extend ultimatum, and page 2 has the details to that story. Another story says arms racketeering, 3 soldiers caught maritalized jailed for life, and page 29 has the details to that story. Ibadan, Oyo restricts traffic for Ladoja's coronation, and page 2 has the details to that story. Lagos Cop, woman killed as container crushes tricycle, and page 4 and 5 have the analysis to that story.
Audio Jungle.
And the last story on the Punch newspaper says Pengasan, Nupeng rejects government's plan to sell assets, and page 21 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
Alright, so moving on to the last newspaper on the second segment, which is Nigerian Tribune. And the latest story on Nigerian Tribune this morning says, business leaders express hope as CBN cut interest rates to 27%, and page 5 has the details to that story. And there are two riders to that story. The first rider says it's a step toward building more resilient, growth-oriented economy, says CPPE. And the last rider says NECA DG holds strategic raising to boost growth, in page 5 out analysis to that stories. Pengasan kicks against federal government's plan to sell JV Hoi assets, and page 3 has the details to that story. Another story on Nigerian Tribune says Senate unseals Natasha office as she resumes aim tight security, and page 3 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
And there are two riders to that story. The first rider says, I want to apologize, she votes. And the last rider says, court adjourns senator preliminary objection to October 27, and page 23 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
Ekiti 2026, I have confidence in our party, says Oyebanji, and page 13 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
Alleged land gambling, Ogun government files charges against two traditional rulers and others, and page 29 has the details to that story. Still on Nigerian Tribune, another story says First Bank to launch financial service for blind, physical challenged customers, and page 6 has the details to that story. Health, uncontrollable high blood pressure puts over 1 billion people at risk, says WHO, and page 4 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
And last story on Nigerian Tribune says 44th Olubadan, Tinubu article Sultan Emir of Kano Ilorin expected at Ladoja's coronation, and page 4 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
And there are a lot of riders to that story. The first rider says New Olubadan begins traditional rites. Another rider says Ibadan in festive mood as billboard banners flowed straight. We have never witnessed such, says resident. And the last rider says coronation committee announced road to be closed on Friday, and page 4 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
So we have come to the end of the second segment. Before we move on to the last segment, let's go on a break. Stay tuned, I'll be right back.
Aces Hotels and Conference Center is one and only event place with a clear difference and tasteful excellence here in the ancient city of Ibadan. For your next and upcoming event, whether marriage engagement, wedding reception, anniversaries, conferences, seminars, or birthday, the Aces Hotels and Conference Center is affordable and fully equipped with all imaginable ultra-modern facilities for your total convenience without headache, security, power, environment, parking space, and royal service by their staff. All roads lead to the Aces Hotel and Conference Center today at number 2.5 Ijokodo Akbete Akufo Road, Akere, Ibadan. For booking and more information, call 080-8746-7420, 080-9744-1898, or 080-2869-0012. The Aces Hotels and Conference Center, where comfortability speaks in words.
Ènìyàn mi lọ́kùnrin àti lóbìnrin, lọ́mọdé àti lágbà, orúkọ mi ni olóyè Dr. Olérèpà Iná Ìdánilọ́lá mẹ́fà. Mo ń fi àsìkò rọ̀ yìí wípé kẹ́ máa gbọ́ FM radio and TV nígbà gbogbo. Torí pé ẹ máa kọ́gbọ́n bẹ̀, ẹ máa nímọ̀, ẹ máa lóye gbogbo ìgbà títẹ́ fi ń gbóhùn létí, ojú tẹ́ fi ń wọ̀n gbé fọ́. Máa gbọ́ wọn, ẹ máa ṣe iṣẹ́ tí yín náà ló jí sẹ́mi lọ́wọ́. Ẹ ṣé púpọ̀, mo dúpẹ́.
Ìgbà tó tó gbá ní ṣe baálé ọba gbọ́migbọ́mi, kọ̀ǹkọ̀ tó tún kọ̀ǹkọ̀ ní ṣe ọba wọn lálẹ́ odò. Bó jẹ́ tìròyìn tó kojú owó, orin tó dùn ún gbọ́ létí, àṣà, ẹ̀fẹ̀ àtàwọn ọ̀rọ̀ ìṣítí lọ́lọ́kanjọ̀kan. Ìkànnì MFM rédíò ọba ló jẹ́ láwùjọ rédíò.
So welcome back to the show. It's still from the newspaper. Don't forget you can watch us live on Facebook at MFM 97.3. And as you're watching us, do also like, comment, and share. We are now in the last segment of From the Newspaper this morning, which is the details to the headlines. And the first story I'm bringing on this morning says, Pengasan no Peng rejects government's plan to sell oil assets. Two of Nigeria's influential oil sector unions have strongly opposed the federal government report plan to divest significant stake in joint ventures assets managed by the Nigeria National Petroleum Company Limited. The Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria and the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers on Tuesday warned that such move could destabilize the economy, weaken the oil industry, and jeopardize the welfare of the workers.
At the joint press briefing in Abuja, Pengassan President Festus Osifo and the NOPEN counterpart Williams AKINYEMI rejected the proposal to cut the government's stake in JB assets by such as 30 to 35%. Currently, the federal government holds between 55 and 60% of such assets through NLPCL. According to the union, the planned sales will generate quick cash, but at the expense of Nigeria's long-term economic security. They cautioned that reducing government holding in the critical could bankrupt NLPC, impair its ability to meet obligations such as salaries and welfare package. The shrink its contribution to the national budget. The controversy followed the President Bola Tinubu's directive last month for the reassessment of the NLPC's 30% management fee and 30% frontier exploration deduction under the Petroleum Industry Act. Tinubu, in charge of economic management, lead team by Finance Minister Wale Edun, stressed the need to optimize government savings, streamline deduction from the federation accounts, and enhance fiscal discipline in the terms of global financial strain. But oil union said the administration's latest policy moves, including talks of amending the PI code to create a more uncertain in the sector that only recently secured a comprehensive reform law after decades of delays. Osifo warned that further devastated could cripple NLPC's ability to sustain in operations. A record previous divestments by international oil companies, including Eni's Agri subsidiary, ExxonMobil, and Shell was in Nigeria assets, were acquired by domestic firms such as Ohando and Seplat. The union also accused the Ministry of Finance and attempting to remove the Minister of Petroleum from joint ownership of NLPC, and now they describe as a backdoor hijack of the company. They argued that the proposed amendments will strip NLPC of its core national role, scare away investors, and send negative signal about Nigeria policy consistency. The oil union rejects aid another layer of tension of the government's economic reform drive, while the administration seeks quick fix to access fiscal pressure. Other labor insets and selling off critical national oil sector would motivate the country's future. Both Pengassan and NOPEN have urged President Tinubu to prioritize national interest over short-term gain, warning that any more move weaken NLPCL could corrode Nigeria's economic foundation and trigger industrial unrest. Another story says SSANU NASU extend ultimatum. The Joint Action Committee of the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian University and the Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities and alleged institution has extended the strike ultimatum issued to the government by 2 weeks. Recall that both unions earlier gave the federal government a 7-day ultimatum over unresolved welfare issue, warning of looming nationwide strike. In a joint letter signed by SSANU President Muhammad Ibrahim, the union described the unjust disbursement of the earned allowance of staff of universities, non-payment of outstanding allowance, among others. Ibrahim recalled that the Joint Action Committee of NASU and SSANU had in a letter dated June 18, 2025, drawn to attention to the government to unresolved labor matters. The letter eroded leads to the meeting with the minister on July 4, 2025. In a French letter addressed to the chapter of the unions nationwide on Tuesday, the leadership of the union noted that the decision to extend the ultimatum followed a meeting with the permanent secretary of the Minister of Education, Abel Eniton, on Friday, September 19, 2025. $8.41 trillion oil theft during the economy, fuel investor doubts. Nigeria lost crude oil value as a struggling $8.41 trillion to theft amazing deficiency between 2021 and July 2025, according to the latest data source from Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. Although the regulator celebrated recent progress in reducing daily losses to the lowest life level in nearly 16 years, experts warned the cumulative economic toll to remain devastating and expose governance failure in the oil sector. NUPRC's analysis showed that Nigeria lost 36.6 million barrels of crude oil in 2021, 20.9 million barrels in 2022, 4.3 million barrels in 2023, 4.1 million barrels in 2024, and 2.4 million barrels between January and July 2025. In a total losses amount to $5.61 billion, equivalent to 8.41 trillion naira. At the current exchange rate of about 1,500 naira per dollar, to put into perspective stolen value, would have built 56,074 plenary health centers at 1,005 million each, funded 129,401 classroom block at 65 million each, and constructed 10,191 kilometer road. By comparison, the federal government allocated just 1 trillion naira for 468 road projects in 2025 budget, barely 1/8 of the value of the oil losses in 4.5 years. The 8.41 trillion also exceeded the entire 2.48 trillion naira health budget and nearly tripled the 3.52 trillion naira education budget for 2025. Energy experts, however, said the sheer scale of the post losses highlight the massive development opportunities. Squandered United States-based oil and gas consultant SHAQEEROH said while the reduction to 2.4 million barrels in the first 7 months of 2025 represents progress, Nigeria still lags behind its production target.
Audio Jungle.
Another story says Natasha resumes as Senate calls Akpabio dictator. The senator representing Kogi Central, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, on Tuesday resumed legislative duties at the National Assembly after months of suspension, describing Senate President Godswill Akpabio as a dictator. Her return followed the unsealing of her office, located in Suite 2.5 of the Senate wing, by the Deputy Director of the National Assembly, Sergeant Atham Alabi Adedeji. Upon resumption, Senator Natasha, who has been on suspension, remained resolute, insisting that she has no apology to tender. Upon resumption, Akpoti-Uduaghan, who has been the center of the protracted standoff with Senate leadership, maintained her defiance, stressing that she had no apology to tender. The embattled lawmaker has ended a 6-month suspension in March, briefing her from all activities of the 10th Senate over alleged misconduct during her protest against the reassignment for her seat by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio on February 20. Although her suspension formally lapsed in September, she was unable to return due to legal issue and resistance from the Senate leadership. On July 4, however, the Federal High Court in Abuja ruled that the suspension was excessive and unconstitutional. Following the judgment, Akpoti-Uduaghan wrote to the Senate notifying it of her intention to resume duties, but the request was rebuffed by the National Assembly. It, however, remained unclear whether Tuesday's development restored her field privilege as a senator, and if the senator will not allow to sit with her colleagues when plenary resumed on October 7. Meanwhile, the Senate leadership has again altered its legislative calendar, shifting the resumption of plenary sitting from September 23 to October 7, 2025. The postponement was conveyed in an internal memo signed by the Chief of Staff to the Senate President, Chinedu Akubeze. The shift in the date has raised the ISBO within the National Assembly as it extends the chamber's annual recess by another 2 weeks. While no official reason was given, sources told the correspondent that the delay was intended to allow lawmakers to fully observe the Independence Day celebration on October 1st. The Senate has adjourned the plenary on July 24th, its annual recess. At this time, the Senate President justified the move of an act of chamber presidency since the member of the House of Representatives has also embarked on a break in line with the legislative calendar. With the latest adjournment, critical debate and the pending motion, including oversight inquiry into government suspending the executive appointment, will remain on hold.
Audio Jungle. 411% revenue rise won't stop federal government's borrowing, says Federal Inland Revenue Service. The executive chairman of the Federal Highland Revenue Service, Zach Adedeji, on Tuesday said the federal government will continue to borrow despite its significant revenue inflow in recent months. He heard that borrowing is not a sign of weakness but part of the country's broader economic strategy. Adedeji also revealed that federal revenue collection soared to 3.64 trillion naira in September 2025, a 411% jump from 711 billion naira in May 2023. The comments come barely 2 months after President Bola Tinubu in July requested a $21.5 billion external loan, including a $2 billion foreign currency bond and 757.98 billion naira bond to settle pension liabilities under the contributory pension scheme. 3 weeks earlier, on September 2, Tinubu declared that Nigeria had met its revenue target 2025 ahead of schedule and will no longer rely on borrowing to fund. Government borrowing is not used to pay salaries but rather to secure long-term investment. He asked critics to manage how much expensive it would have been if the current fiscal structure had not been built at the time. He stressed that borrowing allowed government to avoid higher future costs. The revenue chief further described borrowing as a part of what it termed a matching concept in business, which emphasized continuity. According to him, projects with the benefit to outlive the present generation should not be shouldered entirely at once. For example, borrowing to borrow a road ensure that future users can contribute through taxes, thereby paying their fair share over time. According to him, borrowing is a critical element of any sound economic plan, and no company or country can grow sustainably without it, since it was integral of the viable notion economic system. Meanwhile, in his presentation to journalists, Adedeji revealed that federal revenue collections soared to 3.64 trillion in September 2025, a 411% jump from 711 billion in May 2023. The increase, he explained, was driven by higher non-oil receipts, with first non-oil collection topping 1.6 trillion naira compared to 151 billion 2 years earlier. Oil revenue from first also grew to 644 billion naira, while VAT jumped more than therefore to 723 billion naira. CBN lower interest rates, OPS demand credit relief. The Monetary Policies Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria has reduced the country's benchmark interest rate to 27%, the first cut in 2025 after 3 consecutive pauses, signaling a shift in policy towards supporting economic recovery. While welcoming the move, members of the organizer private sector heard that reduction remained marginal and significant to ease the credit skills on manufacturers and small businesses. Announcing the decision as a press briefing on Tuesday in Abuja, after the committee's 302nd meeting, CBN Governor Olayemi Kadoso said all 12 members voted in favor of 50 basis points cut from 27.5%. The committee also adjusted the standing facilities corridor to 250 to -250 basis point, raises the cash reserve requirement to commercial banks to 45%, while retaining merchant bank at 16% and introduced a 75% CRR on non-TSA public sector deposits. The liquidity ratio was left unchanged at 30%. The MPC noted that headline inflation slowed to 20.12% in August from 21.88% in July. Food inflation fell to 21.87% from 22.74%, while core inflation eased to 20.33% from 21.33%. On a month-to-month basis, inflation dropped sharply to 0.74% in August compared with 1.99% in July. A Ebeshala called for special credit window as signaled digital rate for small business, stressing that alternative funding source beyond the bank must also be explored. The Center of Promotion and Private Enterprises echoed similarly sentiment, commending the MPC's move but stressing the need for complementary fiscal reform. He however stressed that monetary easing alone is not enough. Fiscal authority must prioritize infrastructure,
to reduce production costs, strengthen the regulatory framework, and sustain fiscal consolidation to ensure macroeconomic stability and investor confidence. Yusuf further urged the government to address insecurity, which continues to threaten private investment and rural productivity. Observers agree that the CBN decision marks a significant shift in monetary policy, moving from stabilization toward growth as a signal of interest but fell short of delivering immediate relief. The consensus across the OPS is that credit costs must not stop significantly further, ideally into single digits, to unclog the full potential of the Nigeria product sector.
Audio Jungle.
Story says man stabs relative to death over land dispute in Anambra. The Anambra State Police Command has arrested one Okechukwu Eziomu, male aged 45 years, for allegedly stabbing his relative to death over a family land dispute in Omu, 65-year-old, on the chest during a quarrel over the land dispute on Monday evening. Following the incident, the victim was immediately rushed to the hospital where he was confirmed dead by the medical doctor on duty. The spokesman for the Anambra State Police Command, SP Tokuchukwu Ikenga, who confirmed the development in the press statement on Wednesday, said the police officer has visited the scene of crime, police divisional headquarters, arrested the